Hey everybody, this is John from MTG Nexus with coming at you with some more Pioneer content. As a friendly reminder, we are doing some Pioneer content, especially as the format gets rolling here. Obviously, it's the new big craze with the new format announcement a couple days ago, followed by some actual league play available, I think, starting this evening. These particular games were played before any leagues and such were being played, so this is still some hashing out to do. This is Abzan Midrange versus Temur Marvel. As a friendly reminder, if you like what you're seeing on the channel, please consider subscribing, giving us a thumbs up, leaving a constructive comment down below. As we're going to be doing both Pioneer content as the format starts to shake out, we'll probably still continue to focus on red aggressive decks, but we will be playing other decks as an intro to get familiar with the format and etc. in addition to playing the red aggro decks. And in Modern, we will still continue to play Burn and a little bit of Visit Phoenix. So for those of you who are primarily here for the Burn content, don't fear, we will be concentrating on that. I'll still be doing donation deck lists, especially for Modern content, and we'll still be doing the occasional Legacy Burn League. So don't fret for my usual viewers, we are continuing to do Burn Modern content. We're just focusing a little bit more on Pioneer during the beginning weeks here. This particular list is from Frank Carson's article on Channel Fireball. I made one adjustment because I figured it would be beneficial to the deck. I'll get into that as I'm filling it out or talking about. And we also have the Temur Marvel deck tech, and then we'll get into a couple of matches I played that were played between these two particular decks. So this is Abzan Midrange, basically built around abusing the power of Siege Rhino. For those of you that weren't familiar, during Cons of Tarkara Standard, Siege Rhino was probably the de facto of the big three-color cards. It gives you a Lightning Helix attached to a 4/5 Trampler. Pretty good rates overall. This creature can be hard to deal with. You get the life gain trigger, etc. Beyond that, you just have a green-black X shell. You got things like Thoughtseize, Fatal Push, Assassin's Trophy. Frank had Abrupt Decay in his list, and while I think Abrupt Decay could be a perfectly reasonable card in a lot of spots, I think the ability to hit things like Aetherworks Marvel or Feldar Guardian, that kind of stuff could be relevant. So limiting yourself to three CMC or less, and then the fact between Fatal Push and Abrupt Decay, you would not really have the ability to hit anything above 4 CMC with Revolt. So, I kind of splash with the Assassin's Trophies rather than the Abrupt Decays to have a better hit on removal spells. Beyond that, you've got a bunch of value creatures, things like Tireless Tracker, Grimflare, especially if you can trigger Delirium. Etheridge Shaman, this card's been banned in literally every format that's ever been played except for Standard. Part of the reason fetch lands were banned were to see if cards like this, things like Dig Through Time and such, can exist without fetch lands. So in order to enable to kind of bust that, Frank opted to run Fabled Passage and Field of Ruin, which might slow your mana down a little bit, but it does enable your ability to trigger Etheridge Shaman, especially on turn 2 or turn 3, potentially. And this is a very, very powerful card. Like I said, it's been banned in Legacy, banned in Modern. Thoughtseize is a good piece of disruption in a non-counterspell based deck. Fatal Push, probably the most efficient removal spell in the format, especially if you can trigger Revolt with things like Field of Ruin and Fabled Passage. Scavenging Ooze pairs with Grimflares to have your two mana threats along with Smuggler's Copter. This allows you to kind of churn through your deck, get another source of card advantage. This was another card that's been banned in certain formats. Beyond that, Tireless Tracker gives you some value, and then Liliana the Last Hope is kind of your Planeswalker of choice. This allows you to attack smaller creatures, reduce them in power, outright kill them, allows you to get back creatures, and also has the ability to ultimate on 7, which can force your control decks to play a different game than they really want to. Especially in a format without a lot of creature lands, this card could be problematic to deal with. And then 2 copies of Tasigur, because you're not really overly taxing your graveyard. You have Skoos and Etheridge Shaman. Other than that, you're not really taxing your own graveyard, so a couple Delve cards. You could even include something like a Murderous Cut, but I think Tasigur is a pretty decent one here. And the ability to get back cards with Tasigur's ability in the mid to late game could be relevant. Beyond that, you have cards like Once Upon a Time to kind of hold the deck together. You're running a little bit lower land count as a result, so Once Upon a Time allows you to find a land, get your land rolling. Collective Brutality, it's a way to enable getting lands in your graveyard with Etheridge Shaman. Also, overall, pretty good card, especially against aggressive and control decks. Could be decent against combo-based decks, depending on what their payoff is. If they're something like Marvel, it's not as good if they're things like Emery combo or Scape Shift could be a little bit more relevant. That's pretty much it for the main deck. You have your 3-color mana base, helped out by things like Blooming Marsh and such, the shock lands. So you will be taking a little bit of damage from your mana base as a 3-color deck, but you do have access to, once again, things like Siege Rhino, things like Scavenging Ooze, and things like Etheridge Shaman, so you can kind of afford to take that life loss a little bit. Sideboard is an interesting set of cards. Anafenza comes in when you need a bigger butt, and also is pretty decent against graveyard-based decks. Dramoka's Command when you're facing, especially against the burn decks, but can be pretty good when you need another removal spell. Ashiok's pretty good against anything trying to search his library, and also pretty good against, incidentally, like graveyard decks. Kaya, pretty good against anything with a bunch of 1-drops and you're trying to gain life, so can be decent against aggressive decks. Can also be good against decks trying to rely on their graveyard. Shut down things like Torrential Gearhulk, also help shut down various graveyard synergies, such as Rally the Ancestors and such. There are people trying to do Prize Amalgam synergies, etc. Leyline the Void, much the same thing. It almost feels like we have too much graveyard and hate in this list, but it's definitely a decent card. And then Duress comes in situations where your opponent's got a lot of non-creature spells and or has a key relevant spell, such as the Aetherworks Marvel deck that we're facing off against. This could be a really key card in those situations. And that's pretty much it for this sample Abzan list. Let's get on to the deck tech for Temur Marvel. There we are, back with the deck tech for the Temur Marvel deck. This is probably one of the 2 more obvious combo decks available in the Pioneer format. This and Saheeli Cat combo are the 2 that people will probably aim to get broken / banned the quickest. So, this card is one of the energy subset cards. This card was, deck was banned, had 2 different cards banned in Standard. Emrakul the Promised End and Aetherworks Marvel. At first they tried to ban the payoff, and they realized that the problem with Aetherworks Marvel, eventually the Rogue Refiner and Attune with Ether were also banned because the energy mechanic was busted in Standard. That's not to say it's not impossible to combat here in Pioneer. You have different tools. You have things like Thoughtseize, which make Marvel a little bit worse, and so many other things, which we'll be looking at the examples today. Basically what the deck is trying to do is set up Aetherworks Marvel, get 6 energy into play. You have a lot of enablers to do that in order to flip either an Ulamog the Ceaseless Hunger or an Emrakul the Promised End into play. Emrakul allows you to take your opponent's next turn, and then Emrakul, or Ulamog obviously comes down, exiles a couple permanents, and then chomps up their library in a couple turns. Ishkana here, kind of a gum up the works kind of thing against aggro decks. Beyond that, you're using things like Attune with Ether to fix your mana in a 3-color mana base. Mana's quite good in a 3-color mana base with Ether Hub. And Servant of the Conduit, which also is both an enabler for energy and a mana dork. You have Harness Lightning as a removal spell, but can also serve as an energy thing, targeting one of your own creatures even and choosing not to kill it. Rogue Refiner, Whirler Virtuoso provide you with other means of using energy. Rogue Refiner here draws you a card. Whirler Virtuoso, if you don't happen to find a copy of Aetherworks Marvel or an Emery to bring it back, enables you to make a bunch of Thopters, possibly kill your opponent that way, or buy you a lot of time. Woodweaver's Puzzle Knot here allows you to gain 3 life and 3 energy. Pretty brutal against burn decks, especially. I've noted even in Modern at points that this card can single-handedly beat a burn deck. It's not something as a mono-red player or a burn player I usually want to see. And then a couple different cards newer to the thing. Oko could be pretty good in the mirror match and against other mid-range decks, and then Emery allows you to replay these cards from the graveyard. Your Aetherworks Marvel and your Woodweaver Puzzle Knots can be important. And Vessel of Nascency allows you to search through your deck, find creatures, find land drops, find your Aetherworks Marvel, as ways to kind of tie it all together. That's pretty much the main deck. It's a semi-consistent combo deck. There were versions that were red-green in the past, I believe, but I think the addition of Rogue Refiner and Emery are both pretty good, and there's no additional payoffs in this format like Through the Breach to just enable really playing the 2 colors. So on the sideboard, once again, this is Frank Karsten's list, so take it with a grain of salt. He has Grafdigger's Cage as the graveyard chart card of choice. I don't know that I necessarily agree with that, given that Cage does shut down your own Aetherworks Marvel. So I think that was actually a poor deck building choice on Frank's part, but we were playing card for card his list. Pithing Needle can shut down problematic Planeswalkers and such. Could be a problem. Also could shut down opposing Aetherworks Marvels or, Saheeli, etc. Ether Harvester here kind of for the aggressive decks, allows you to buy a little bit more time. Veil of Summer, this is more for the blue decks. You could potentially bring it in against decks with discard, but much like Modern, sometimes discard usually comes down a little bit earlier than you can hold up the green mana. Kozilek's Return helps to combat various tribal decks, also can flash it back if you have one in your graveyard with your big Eldrazi, usually wiping the board at that point and then coming down having an uncontested Eldrazi. And then Ceremonious Rejection, pretty much against things like Hardened Scales and the Mirror Match. So, like I said, this is a non-tune list. Obviously, this was one of Frank Carson's just initial deck lists, so we'll be playing this against one of his initial Abzan lists. Wanted to test this particular matchup because in the past, Black-Green Delirium struggled against the Go Bigger version of basically their own deck with Etheridge Marvel. So I'd be interested to see if the mid-range decks can compete against the combo decks with the addition of Thoughtseize to their arsenal. Anyways, on to the matches. And we're back for match number 1, game number 1, doing from perspective of the Abzan mid-range deck. This set of recordings is a little bit frustrating because the original set of games that were played were corrupted apparently and would not let me do the replay, so I've had to go back and play another series of matches. So that's why this video is taking a little bit longer than expected. So the hand seems pretty reasonable in the matchup. You got Once Upon a Time to dig for more threats, Thoughtseize to potentially take a Marvel, Fatal Push, potentially hit a Mana Dork, either a Servant of Conduit or Elvish Mystic, so this hand seems pretty reasonable. Lead off on Once Upon a Time, before we cast a Etheridge Shaman or anything. Take the Tireless Tracker here because we need the threat. Could Thoughtseize here, but if you happen to know the matchup, like we're not playing the matchup blind, Thoughtseize that you generally want to save for the turn before they could play Marvel, if at all possible in your curve. You play a Tune with Ether, grab a Mountain, Thoughtseize. Mainly doing this because curve-wise we're going to want to play Tireless Tracker next turn. We see Ishkana, Ulamog, and Woodweaver's Puzzle Knot. Puzzle Knot's really the only thing that matters at this point. It's both an energy enabler and the fact that it enables our opponent to get energy, or to gain life. Instead of attacking with Etheridge Shaman, activate there at the end of turn. Play out the tracker, as I was mentioning earlier, that's where we want to play it in the curve. One just continues to play lands. We do get Tasker now that we've disrupted them. We want to kill them as quickly as possible before Ishkana can come down. Go ahead and crack a clue. Doing this because I want to play Skoos and kill their thing. And then our opponent plays Ishkana. We untap, trophy it, and then kill them. So sometimes the Marvel deck will stumble a little bit. If they have their nut draws and they're able to hit a Marvel before we can develop a board presence, oftentimes it's a loss. But there is some inherent inconsistency with the Marvel deck. I mean, Frank did a pretty good job of building that version of Marvel, but you still have mana issues. It's a 3-color deck. You still need to hit 6 energy. You still need to have the Marvel or a payoff. So not the easiest thing in the world to always assemble consistently. It's not like the deck has a lot of cantrips or anything. When I was playing Marvel in Modern, that consistency was also an issue in addition to speed. Like a lot of times you could hit the turn 4 draw, but if you didn't hit the nuts on turn 4, basically you were dead to rights. My friend Vince and I both worked on Marvel quite a bit, and it felt like it was just on the edge of playability in Modern, but a lot of inconsistency and a lot of issues. So in a format like Pioneer, where there's not as many established and fast combo decks, maybe it has a little bit more of a chance. But anyways, on to sideboarding for game number 2. So there's a couple different things and ways you could approach sideboarding in this matchup. You could potentially bring in Dromoka's commands as additional removal spells for the creatures to try to get them dead. Could have bring in Anafenza as another series of beef. I opted for a little bit of minimum sideboarding. Boarded out the 3 Collected Brutalities because there really isn't a whole lot of good targets, and there isn't a ton of creatures you need to kill that Brutality can kill. You basically have the Mana Dorks and Rogue Refiner. Can Drain give a little bit of reach, but I think Duress is more important to hit the key card. Etheridge Marvel, so that's what the switch was. Unfortunately, we'll be on the draw in this game. Hand is okay. We have some pressure and some disruption, but the pressure is going to be slow to come out, and the disruption going to be a little bit awkward with Fable Passage. One does nothing on turn 1. That Lander off definitely helped. Play a Puzzle Knot. And crack for a Swamp. Go ahead and Thoughtseize here on 2. Once again, we could have played the Copter this turn, which might have been correct, but we see a hand of double Etheridge Marvel, Servant of the Conduit, Lightning Helix. So, could take one of the Marvels, hope to rip either a Duress or a whatnot, or we can try to take a Harness Lightning or a Servant Conduit, try to choke them on mana and energy. I chose to take the Harness Lightning and try to kill them before they can assemble enough energy, which seems actually kind of foolish, but I probably should have taken the Servant of the Conduit, honestly. Now, we had Servant covered with Fatal Push, so it was really just take Harness Lightning, hope to choke them on energy a little bit, maybe. And looks like they're going to miss a land drop, which might give us a chance here. Play Battle Cattle. Don't really want to attack Tireless Tracker into the Servant of the Conduit. We certainly could have Fatal Pushed them here. The problem with this line is, so we Fatal Push, attack with Tireless Tracker. I guess we could have played Smuggler's Copter, which might have been a better line. Choke them on mana since they're having issues. Unfortunately, they get a Marvel activation here. Just hit a Rogue Refiner. The other problem with facing off against specifically Marvel is a lot of times it finds cards to enable it to continue its own chain. So like turn after turn, a lot of times you're facing down a lot of recursion once it gets into play. So it's kind of its own engine once you fire it off once a lot of times. Cracked a clue here to be able to both dig for a Assassin's Trophy, also to be able to revolt a Fatal Push, a Rogue Refiner to continue to pressure them. Yes, we're giving them energy, but we do need to get them dead at this point. Play out a Smuggler's Copter, continue to pressure them in the air should they happen to find something. They play an Oko, turn their guy into a 3/3, which makes it a better blocker. We Duress, take the other Marvel. So once again, that Thoughtseize, it might have been correct to take the first Marvel and hope to hit a trophy or another discard spell. We got the Grim Player here. Let's go to attacks. Blocks to spare some life. They get another energy. Opponent creates kind of a clever here. They create a food token with Oko. Use its ability to sack to get another energy. They find an Ulamog. So the game isn't over yet. It's pretty close. Thoughtseize away the Ishkana. We basically need to drain them out at this point, and our opponent realizes that and turns our death rate into a 3/3. Uses the Vessel to continue to dig. Continue to crack clues here. Once again, we could be attacking and try to force through some damage, but our opponent's just kind of making our guys pretty bad here. And then they just kind of activate another Rogue Refiner, do the thing, make their guy a 3/3. Once again, our game plan's kind of hoping to drain them out, but very unlikely as they have an active Marvel. And there's Emrakul for the scoop. So, definitely a couple of lines I could have taken. I think the one misplay was I should have Fatal Pushed the Servant of the Conduit and kind of hope to choke them on mana and then hope to kill them before they're recovered. Once again, it's kind of hard when they have redundant copies of Etheridge Marvel to disrupt them enough. We're more akin to Little Kid Jund than we are Little Kid Abzan rather than true Abzan midrange from Modern. So we're more of a pressure plus disruption deck rather than a disruption plus pressure deck. And oftentimes, they're not always going to have the nut draw, but, as you saw there, they are capable of playing a grindy mid-range game in certain games and then just out-grinding you and eventually killing you. So they don't always have to have the nut draw on turn 4, and that's part of what makes Marvel such a resilient and powerful deck in a lot of situations. So, anyways, on to game number 3. Here for game number 3, we are on the play. Our opponent. This hand's just not fast enough. We don't have any disruption. Copter into Rhino plus Liliana. Liliana's not really meaningful disruption against anything, especially except for Elvish Mystic potentially, so this hand's a mulligan, unfortunately. This hand's much the same thing, but I still think we have to keep on 6, get rid of Liliana. We have the Assassin's Trophy to potentially tag something in the early going, especially an early Marvel. That plays an Elvish Mystic, we fetch that. Draw Fatal Push, just kill their dork, try to slow down their development. They have a Servant in the Conduit. Go ahead and let them untap with Servant, which seems a little bit stupid in hindsight. I don't push there, which ends up costing us the ability to play Tasker this turn, which could end up being relevant. Opponent seems to be kind of floundering around here, get some mediocre beats going. Go ahead and push one of their servants. Now they play Tasker a turn later than should have been. Plays Puzzle Knot. They can't really attack. We go ahead and go in for the attack here, play out Etheridge Shaman, play out Skoos. Kills the Skoos, which is interesting. Plays out Marvel. They play Oko off of their thing. Turn our 4-5 into a 3-3. We start trying to play some Battle Cattle here. So the only other option, the one option I do have is I could Assassin's Trophy the Marvel. The problem with Assassin's Trophying the Marvel is opponent has Emery in play. So the lines I could take is Assassin's Trophy the Emery, attack Oko. Could play Battle Cal here to get more pressure on the table. I was also drain the opponent. Or I could just take my turn to trophy something, either the Marvel or the Emery. So I choose to play Battle Cattle this turn, which may or may not be correct. Still continue to pressure the Tassiger. Our opponent can't really do much here. Cast Thoughtseize. Opponent has a Harness Lightning here to take care of Battle Cattle. Take the Whirler Virtuoso. Trophy the Marvel. So the reason I decided to trophy the Marvel there is our opponent doesn't have the mana to activate a Woodweaver's Puzzle Knot, so if they activate Emery next turn and recast Marvel, all they're effectively doing is spending their entire turn to do Marvel, and that's exactly what they're going to do. Unfortunately, we're not really getting any further ahead in terms of pressure. Should have attacked there, but in the end, I don't think it's going to matter here as they activate Marvel. Get another Marvel. Get another spin. Cast an Ishkana. Bunch of spiders. At this point, I give up because we're not grinding through this and they still have multiple activations. That's what I was talking about with the Assassin's Trophy, is it's just really hard when your opponent has assembled the Emery plus Emrakul combo to kind of punch through and kill them. Oko did a little bit of work there, but I can't help but feel that they're something other better mid-range there, maybe additional copies of Ishkana or something. I don't think that's the best Oko deck. It's not really able to defend it particularly well, but we'll keep a look at that as we move along. This is what I mean by the core of the deck being very powerful. As far as Temur Marvel, it is able to grind a little bit, especially against decks without a bunch of counter spells. So, the mid-range decks kind of had some problems, especially the green-black Delirium deck had problems with punching through all the stuff that Marvel had going on. It did have access to, I believe, Stain the Mind. It had access to 1 in a black, take target card, X or greater. I can see the art, but I can't think of the card's name. But it did have access to some discard, but it wasn't particularly great in the matchup. And as you're seeing, it can kind of outgrind the green-black mid-range decks. So, the Abzan rule is definitely aggressor. The Temur deck is definitely the control deck in the matchup. But let's see some more of that in match number 2. Back here for match number 2. So another reason why this video took a little bit longer to get up is I wanted to get some videos with some back and forth play, some variety to them. There were some videos that were some play mistakes and stuff, and while there's certainly some mistakes in last round, I wanted to get some videos for you guys that actually showed like kind of how the matchup goes, without one deck really floundering or the other. So, taking a look at this hand, especially knowing the matchup, this hand's just way too slow. Liliana and the Siege Rhino, simply not good enough here, so you got a mulligan, unfortunately. This hand's a lot better. We have Once Upon a Time to fix the mana. Gotta put back a card. It's probably Tassiger, but I can't remember what I end up doing here. Guess I end up putting back a land, that makes sense. Opponent's no plays on 1. Take our draw step Once Upon a Time. Probably take Grimflayer here. Yep, need a threat. Play out Deathrite Shaman. Deathrite Shaman nowhere near as powerful as it was when there was a lot of fetch lands enabled. We're jumping through a lot of hoops to try to make it work. Opponent has a very potentially fast start this time. Attack with Grimflayer. Opponent blocks just to buy time. Once again, they are the control deck. So their objective simply is to not die. Okay, they have a Marvel. And turn 4 Emrakul. What can you do? So as we saw the first match, they're very capable of grinding, and then they have this. So really hard to want to play fair decks in the format when this can happen to you, unfortunately. So, anyways, on to game number 2. Back for game number 2, much the same thing as last time. Board out the Collective Totalities, board in the Duresses. Once again, could board in an Offensa, but it's another clunky 3-drop that we really don't need necessarily in the deck. The one thing this format is really missing is the Tarmogoyf-esque Dark Confidant. I guess theoretically, this deck could play the 2/1 Glint Sleeve Siphoner. It could potentially play as its Dark Confidant-esque thing. So here I'm shocking in because generally speaking, we're going to want to go discard spell into one of the 2 drops, probably Smuggler's Copter. I'm going to lead on Duress because Thoughtseize can hit something more relevant down the line. Their hand is Emry, Servant, Ishkana, and Harness Lightning. Go ahead and take the Harness Lightning as its only legal target. They play their Mystic out. We go ahead and play Smuggler's Copter here. They get a tune, play out Servant, so they're developing their mana quite nicely. I choose to play Grim here, which may or may not have been correct. Use the Chopper here. Discard the Duress because it's the least likely to hit of all cards. Our opponent could play out a Marvel here. Just have the Emry. Emry might also have been a reason to Thoughtseize that turn, but I still think as the aggro deck, we need to get pressure, trying to find land drops here. Do hit a land drop, get rid of Scoos, because Battle Cattle is able to punch through these Dorkos a little bit better. And we're going to be playing Deathrite this turn. Thoughtseize, take Ishkana, could come down. They just have 2 lands left in hand. Play out Deathrite Shaman. Opponent plays a Rogue Refiner. So once again, they're kind of grinding here pretty decently. We're able to kind of go over the top of them with the Chopper here. Once again, kind of pressuring them. Get rid of the Chopper, leaving Assassin's Trophy specifically for Marvel, if we can help it. Play out. I was thinking about playing Tassiger here, and it might have been actually correct, but I wanted to leave Grimflare with Delirium. Go ahead to attacks here, leave us with 2 trampling threats and a flyer. So our opponent has to block correctly. Go ahead and Assassin's Trophy to force them to have a removal spell here or they're dead. They do have a removal spell for Battle Cattle. So we just pitch all of those since they're not really relevant. I probably should have fired off Tasker here, and then they just don't draw anything and they're dead to our board, plus I guess Deathrite Shaman Drain. So definitely should have played Tasker here. That was a mistake on my part to not play it at the end of that turn, but once again, pressure plus disruption is key to winning this matchup. Disruption alone, unless you're playing a bunch of counterspells, is probably not good enough. So anyways, on to game number 3. See if we can steal a match from what's probably a pretty bad matchup. So we're on the draw for game number 3 here. Sand, I don't think is good enough. Flare could be enough pressure on its own, but 5 lands and a trophy just doesn't seem good enough. Both players are mulliganing. Sand's okay, a little bit clunky with the Fabled Passages. Still think we keep though. One's got an Attune hand. Go and grab that. Play the Puzzle Knot. So you want to know what the ridiculously scary part is? Our opponent mulligan to 5, and without this duress, they had turn 2 this, turn 3 this, rip a land, play turn 4 Marvel. Seems pretty bad for us. So take the Marvel. Shocks in. Is that another Puzzle Knot? We play Flare because I think it's the best clock. Go ahead and push their dude, continue to pressure them, start filtering our draws a little bit. Leave the Battle Cattle on top because we can play the Deathrite Shaman. Definitely could have played a Grimflare here, but I think playing Deathrite Shaman plus Tassiger is just a little bit better, because we're already filtering our draws a little bit. Opponent cracks their thing this turn. Start pressuring them. Don't want any of those cards. Really at this point looking for more disruption. Opponent kills the Grimflare, which is interesting. I guess they're just trying to avoid us filtering our draws. Find an Aetherworks Marvel, give it a spin, and concede. So I guess they didn't find anything there that was enabling them to continue the game. But very scary. Opponent mulligans to 5. And very easily could have had turn 4 Marvel. So, that's one of the things. The Marvel deck is... There's a lot of air in the Marvel deck. It's a combo deck. It requires energy, 6 energy plus the Marvel. There's not things in the format like Ancient Stirrings to help you find it. I saw some lists attempting to play Karn the Great Creator to find it, which that's certainly an ability you could do. But from the Abzan side, or from Black Green X, period, unless you are on a Sultai variant, your best bet is discard spells into pressure. I don't know if skewing the build this much to get Deathrite Shaman in the mix is worth it. I know Deathrite Shaman is an extremely powerful card, don't get me wrong, but a lot of times we were fighting for the ability to turn Deathrite Shaman on. Tasigur certainly fights with Deathrite Shaman and Grimflayer. That said, I think Grimflayer is still our best 2-drop. So, a lot of uncertainties on both sides of the equation. I think both decks weren't necessarily optimally built yet, but this did show that Midrange can compete with Marvel in this format, which is good, although I do think Midrange is the dog. And then Marvel is just an absurdly powerful deck. It could certainly end up being one of the top tier decks in the format. Beyond that, I think, some people are trying to get cards banned. I think there could definitely be some bannings. I think Cat Combo, Marvel, those are certainly decks that could be on consideration. People trying to get other cards banned, Treasure Cruise, Dig Through Time. I think really the banning of the fetch lands may make it so those cards all stick around. And I really do, because I think this format has the potential to be a lot of fun with a lot of powerful things right now, and I think, people trying to get things banned is kind of... It's fun, but it's also kind of annoying because it takes away a lot of the fun cards that got banned in Modern. Dig Through Time, Treasure Cruise, all those cards got banned in Modern. Power level of this format's obviously a lot lower than Modern, so maybe there's hope that some of these cards will stick around, but it's always something to consider that when you're buying into a new format, especially like in the early days of Modern, they banned a lot of cards right away. Something to keep in mind, watch the format. People are going to try to break the format, so everything's with a grain of salt at this point in time. But anyways, hope you enjoyed this video. If you like what you're seeing, don't forget to subscribe, give us a thumbs up. And I'm going to continue to make both Pioneer and Burn content. Speaking of which, I have a Burn video to go work on for Modern. So I hope you all have a great day and enjoy this continued Pioneer content.